So, welcome back from the break to the second part of today's show on Perspective, the action-packed youth debate show. So, in this part, what's going to happen is we're going to have the actual debate coming from both teams. How it's going to work is I'm going to ask one team to give one of their starting main points, so one of their strongest points, the points which they think is strongest, and then I'm going to ask the other team to respond. Based on that response, the original team can respond, and we're going to go back and forth until I call an end to that particular string of argument. Then I'm going to ask the other team to come up with their main point. So it's quite an easy concept to understand, and I'm sure the judges are ready and will be looking out for, once again, the quality of your arguments and the quality of your speech. So without further ado, let's get into the second part of today's show. I'm going to ask Team Nitro for a change to start this time. You guys are for capital punishment. I'm going to ask you guys to give one of your main starting points, and then we'll see how arguably the best can respond. So would you like to take the mic and just give one of your responses?
Primarily, we're arguing that economically, capital punishment is correct and it should be acceptable. And the reason for this being is because capital punishment costs less than spending for someone who must stay in prison. And also, there's no actual limit to how long a person can stay in prison. So for example, you can give someone life imprisonment, and in the UK I believe it's 25 to 30 years. But however, what if they commit again another crime? So that's another 25 to 30 years, for example, if they commit murder once again. But then that's also another amount of funding being produced onto the individual. Now however, what if there's a numerous amount of people who are also in the same situation as the individual? Then surely there must be a line where we must say that although it may not be humanitarian acceptable, but we should do it in order for the financial reasons, and which is why that's our primary argument for capital punishment.
Okay, so if a criminal doesn't face capital punishment, they end up going to prison, where a lot of money is spent on feeding them and, you know, keeping them within prison. Surely such money would be better spent elsewhere in society.
I would like to offer a rebuttal to that, as we find that it is a general misconception that the death sentence reduces the cost spent on a convict. We have statistics here from the USA where death penalty is currently instated in some states, which shows that average case of a serious crime that does not result with death penalty amounts to $740,000, whereas when the death penalty is sought out, it goes upwards of $1.26 million. Maintaining each death row prisoner costs taxpayers $90,000 more per year than having a prisoner remain in general population. So while it may be thought to be believed that the death penalty is a inexpensive alternative, judging from these statistics, we know that the death penalty and maintaining a person in death row costs a lot more than it would to have them normally in jail, or an alternative which could be suggested by Team Nitro. Furthermore, we'd like to include the example of Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh. His trial lasted over 2 years and was a famous case where the controversial nature of the death penalty was aroused. The total cost of the trial came to over $13 million for the death penalty to be instated and for him to be executed.
Okay, so deciding whether to take someone's life is not a very easy decision. That's why it might take more time to complete the case than, you know, just putting someone in prison. And as a result of this prolonged time, it ends up using up more money. So what would you say to that? The idea that the death penalty in fact saves money, as opposed to your idea that the death penalty in fact uses up more money, than your idea that it saves money. If you don't have a response to that, it's fine, I can move on to the next part. Would you like me to do that? Sure, no problem. So we'll bring an end to that string of debate. Now I'm going to have to ask Team Nitro, I'm going to have to ask Team Arguably the Best, to give your opening point. So just similar to how Team Nitro gave one of their starting arguments, I'm going to ask you guys to do the same. So off you go.
So one of your arguments would be the fact that it's a deterrent for future criminals to commit more crimes. Well, I was reading the statistics and data, and that suggested that it is indeed not a deterrent. Since in 2007, 42 people were executed In 2008, 37 people were executed. However, there was a sharp increase to 52 people executed in 2009, and it went down again to 46 in 2010. Hence, there's no clear correlation between the number of executions and time as it progresses.
Okay, so the argument that the death penalty is something which can scare criminals away, according to ANOSH's statistics, there is actually no correlation. So the death penalty isn't scaring criminals away, so why should it be there? Do you have a response to that?
I think it should be there because, in my opinion, if someone kills someone and what if the death penalty doesn't scare them, then what's the point of going to prison while you could be doing something else? There's no point of committing the murder if you know you're going to go down for it. Like, there's no point of getting arrested, or you could just get killed immediately for doing something bad.
Okay, so sort of coming back to a similar idea originally stated that criminals, they wouldn't really want to be killed. They wouldn't really want to lose their life over a simple crime, but they wouldn't mind going to prison. So what do you say to that?
From that, we can say that capital punishment does have certain advantages in the sense that some may say that it offers a vengeance form of retribution. However, in terms of deterrence, there has been no stated correlation between criminals deciding not to commit a crime based on the fear of being killed. However, deterrence is found in common crimes in simpler cases where capital punishment is not sought out, because deterrence with a crime is in relation to not wanting to be caught. And from the figures that we have, we've seen that people who are deterred from a crime is because they simply do not want to be caught for petty stuff such as shoplifting and common assault. But when it comes to these higher cases and stuff which does have the probability to result in capital punishment, deterrence isn't something that's there, because if someone's wanting to kill someone, they plan it out. It's not a spur of the moment in most cases, and they do plan on getting away, but when they do get caught, it's not based on deterrence. So that's not something that will help with the figures, because if it did, we would have seen in the years a sharp decrease in the amount of people being executed, as they would be deterred from seeing other people die, but that hasn't happened. And just from saying it myself, you don't really see the publication of that many capital punishment cases, because especially in the UK, you don't see it come up in the news as much. It's not something that's publicised, so there isn't much deterrence that actually affects you. It isn't hitting most common criminals because they're not watching the news, they're not seeing this, they're not going to be affected, they're not going to be worried about being killed because it's not on their mind.
Okay, so I'm going to call an end to that string of debate there. So we saw arguably the best with some very good, both teams in fact, with some very good arguments, arguably the best with some strong statistics to back up those arguments. But now I'm going to come back to Team Nitro, and I'm going to ask you guys to yet again give another one of your main starting points for the debate.
We would like to agree as a team. I believe that it is morally correct for the argument that capital punishment should in fact be applied to individuals, and the reason for this being is because there's different adjustments on how the individual will be treated. So for example, what I mean by that is that it's not only execution, but it's also by injection, for example. That's also another way in which an individual can be executed, rather than the most painful one, which you all will probably know about, electrocution by the chair, for example. So which is why we believe that it's morally correct, because the punishment is suited for the individual and what they have done. So for example, if you commit a lethal crime where you clearly show no remorse for the individual or their family, then now obviously it will be morally equal and acceptable for you to also receive the same amount of pain to endure, because it will also bring comfort to the family of the victim, for example. Because although you might say that you would disagree because the individual is also getting hurt, and you can say thou shalt not kill, for example, if you're bringing religion into this. But however, there was also an eye for an eye. So where would you say is now acceptable for an individual to also suffer the same pain in which not the victim because they died, but for example the family of the victim? So what do you say about for them now? So how would they have comfort knowing that their relatives have been killed? So for example, mass murder, not just one person being killed, but numerous amount of people being killed. So what do you say to that now?
Okay, so we have the common argument of an eye for an eye, and you know, the family who are the victim's family, they should surely have some sort of comeuppance, some sort of repayment for what they have lost, and capital punishment offers this.
Okay, so I'd like to respond to this using the quote by Gandhi, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So do we really want to set out revenge as something that will define our generation? And you might say that the victim's family might be hurt, and yes, they would be. But what about the person who will be prosecuted? They must also have a family, so they would have thoughts and feelings as well, and you would have to think about them as well. And replying to the fact that you said lethal injections do not hurt, in 2005 I believe it was, 43 out of 49 cases in the United States where lethal injections were used, there wasn't enough anesthetics that actually made the death procedure very painful for the person. And if you're really going to set about revenge as it being morally right to kill someone, I would have to offer the argument of a sanctity of life. That is it really morally right to kill a person? Is it in our hand? We were created by God, and do we really have the power to take life away?
Anush, would you like to add on to that point?
Yeah, it also creates a vicious cycle, I'd say, as the people who would be affected by the death of the criminal, if they're children, they'd grow up hating the system, and the vicious cycle of general disturbance of society will be created, and a new generation of people who hate the government will also define our generation.
Okay, so what we find from their responses, as you spoke about revenge, but surely revenge should only be placed upon the person who committed the crime, but when you enact capital punishment on them, you're also affecting their family as well. So what would you say?
I would say this, that you have seen in the news, for example, in America, where a family where one person within the family has committed a crime. So now that individual has died because of capital punishment. But now, if, for example, you know the victim of the family, now what if there's no capital punishment? So let's say there's no capital punishment now. So they will feel like they're not being supported with the society. The society is not supporting them. So what do they turn into? Perhaps you will see now members of their family will go into crime, for example. They might get revenge in their own hands by setting out, you see rideouts, for example. That's when an individual or a group of individuals go out to someone to target. And that's what you normally see in America. And the reason for this being is because in those states, there's no capital punishment. So now they feel that their family is not being supported with the society. And that's what you see in most states, where they argue that the society is going against their beliefs or their rights, because they also have the rights. And you're arguing about how we don't have the rights to kill an individual. So what gives the right for an individual to kill a numerous amount of individuals, whilst we can only kill? I believe it will be acceptable for us to an extent where we're able to kill one individual who has perhaps killed several individuals. Because if you continue to let it go, they will believe they can continue, and the society will see a blindfold from that. And that's also not acceptable, because then you'll see a generation where they'll believe, if I commit this crime, it's okay, because my crime's not severe, I won't receive the capital punishment. So then they will also believe and grow up to educating others where it's okay to commit a certain amount of crime.
Okay, so would you have a response to that, Anush?
Yeah, families of murder victims undergo severe trauma and loss, which no one should. However, bringing the death of the murderer doesn't always help the person. I mean, it's not going to bring back the victims, so there's no need for the murderer to be killed. I believe that, as we said before, it's very expensive to actually hold someone on death row, and the full procedure costs a lot of money. That money should be spent on therapy and in basically to console the families, because I believe that it's not morally right to kill someone. As we as youngers, are we taught that revenge is right? I mean, it's not suitable for us.
Okay, Jason?
I'll just add to that quickly. As previously mentioned, the death penalty actually prolongs the whole procedure of dealing with the crime, so the family isn't able to get that sense of satisfaction, that sense of closure as soon as they would had it been a normal trial, because obviously with capital punishment, it's a big thing. A person's life is being taken. It takes upwards of 2-3 years, as mentioned before that family can get their closure. On top of that, I'd like to mention a case example which was quite famous a few years ago of a Iraqi woman who had her son killed. She was given the option to have capital punishment in that state, and it went to the point where the man was just about to be hanged, but she chose not to have her son's murderer killed, which shows that in our society, in the world that we're living in, there is the chance for redemption, there is the chance for good sense of community between people. And this mother had the chance to have her son's murderer killed, and she chose not to. So if she can do that, it shows that we as members of the public shouldn't be invoking our beliefs that a person should be killed when the person's not even related to us. And on top of that, to finish, I'd just like to add a bit of a paradox. When you kill someone, when you murder someone, number of murders in the world stay the same because you are now that murderer.
Okay, thank you very much, Jayshan. So what we've seen from the second round, we've seen a lot of strong arguments coming from both sides. We've seen an eye for an eye, we've seen revenge, and most importantly, we've seen morals pop up quite a bit. So that brings an end to the second part of the show. After the break, we have the third part where the judges will be asking questions to the contestants. So make sure you catch us then.